well met. I am your humble narrator, Amanda, here to entertain, amuse, perhaps even educate with tales of daring do, and more often than not, daring don't. In return, all that I ask is you stay a while and listen. I finally got my crap sorted. Look, all role-playing stuff, all geeky stuff, wargaming stuff, phasers, Sting. I have everything. It's wonderful. I don't have decent lighting yet, and I apologize for that. I'm actually looking at my video feedback, and oh my god, the lighting's terrible. But there isn't a damn thing I can do about that right now. I'll have to figure something out. Anyway, although the slightly dark and kind of works, doesn't it? Anyway, what are we here today to talk about? We are here today to share the beginning of the epic tale of Slaine the Celt. Who is Slaine the Celt? Well, Slaine the Celt was a character created by a friend of mine who will be known as Coy, creator of insanity, because that is exactly what he is. Dude has created more insanity in my tabletop role-playing life than anybody else, actually. Why? He has an absolute talent, a truly great talent for twisting gaming systems. Now, this story happens pretty close to the start of my role-playing career, but not too close. This would have been about 15 years ago, thereabouts. And, you know, I wasn't very experienced. I was running a role-playing game in my own setting for the first time ever. I had never run a game in my own setting before. The setting was still rather in flux, and this was more me playtesting it and playtesting the bastardized version of GURPS with elements of AD&D, with elements of D20 that I had been kind of experimenting with and figuring out if it worked or not. End result being that there was a lot of space for manipulation. So the character generation was quite simple. You rolled your stats and it was standard GURPS, and GURPS, by the way, in case you don't know, is Generic Universal Role-Playing System. Don't let the name fool you, it is anything but generic. Go online, check it out. There's a version of it called GURPS Lite that you can download for free, and you can print it out for free. They encourage you to do so. And where to begin? So Coy rolls his character, and it's good. He has pretty decent rolls. I mean, I ran a house rule that you rolled 6 dice and you got to discount the lowest roll and roll again, if you wanted to. He rolled reasonably well. It was a good character. But then we got to things called advantages and disadvantages. In other systems like AD&D, I believe they're called perks. In GURPS, they're advantages and disadvantages. And he picked 2. He picked heroic death, which means that he has to die in battle. He can't die otherwise. He has a fated death. He also chose another similar fate-based advantage, or disadvantage, depending on how you looked at it, which was that he had chosen to take upon himself. Boy, I could be getting this wrong. It's a long time ago. I'm sure he'll correct me if I'm wrong anyway, but he basically had taken another fate form, and it was one that you choose for yourself. And he chose that he had to die of a fatal illness. Okay, it's 2 ways he can die. He has to die by both. You see the problem with this? Thus was born Slaine the Barbarian, the Celt, the Axeman. Who is he based on? Partially Slaine from the 2000 AD comics, but I also think there was a large dose of the young Drusta Legend by David Gemmell. Because this guy was not an intellectual. I mean, he wasn't dumb by any stretch of the imagination, but he wasn't an intellectual. What he was a unstoppable force of nature. This character was amazing, and he was, in the hands of another player, he would have been a terrible PC. Just awful. But luckily enough, Coy, really good player. While he is more than happy to break a gaming system, he doesn't generally break games. He wants to play the game. He just wants to mess with the GM's mind. So, we're playing this game, the Celtic Campaign. I don't actually remember exactly what the storyline was. I know it ended with a large part of Londinium being destroyed. So, the setting it was based on, and I should explain this, is an alternate history Earth where belief is a force of nature. That's pretty much the only difference between that universe and ours. Belief is a force of nature. So if you believe something strongly enough, or if enough people believe something strongly enough, there's a good chance it will become real. How powerful is it? It's kind of like gravity. You don't really notice it until you don't have it. So, to explain how this world really works, in the modern age right now, there would probably be a company that has a single purpose, and that is to have all of its employees believe wholeheartedly that a mountain is moving 1 millimeter to the right or to the left every single day through sheer force of belief. Now, the thing about it is, in this universe, using belief that way requires training, and it requires an awful lot of experience. You can't just do it. But there is natural flare-ups of belief. Things like Julius Caesar used to say that he was I believe it was the grandson of Aphrodite, Venus, in the Roman mythos. And I thought, and this is where this universe came from, I actually was sitting down and thinking, what if belief was a true, tangible force of nature? And more, what if his legions believed him? All of them. So, Julius Caesar, being the grandson of a god, is immortal. Which leads me to the name of this universe. I've called it Immortal Empires. And this was the very first game in it. And Slaine was basically the first character to be created. And it was a lot of fun. It was an awful lot of fun. So, I don't exactly remember how it started, but there was some quest. They were sent off on some quest by, I think it was the High King of Munster. Or, yeah, the King of Munster. Basically, in Ireland, you had almost a king on every hill, but you had regional kings in what we now call provinces. And then you would have a High King who wasn't really a king as such, more like an arbiter of last resort. He was basically... I've always read the explanations of him as being... He was essentially the Supreme Court. If that makes any sense. So they were sent off to meet the High King for some reason or another, and to interact with his priests to find out information about it was a nightmare, I think. It was a nightmare that King of Munster was having, and he sent this party off to find the cause of the nightmare. And first stop was Tara, seat of the High King, and they're told, "You must go east. The answer lies there. Along the way you will encounter a lake. You will interact with the lake, and from it you shall gain knowledge." As far as I can remember, that's how it went. Thing is, I could be conflating multiple campaigns. I've done a lot of campaigns in that universe at this stage, and a lot of one-shots too. So, yeah, they travel east. Party as a whole travels east. As far as I can remember, no one died up until the very last session, which is kind of odd for my games where the death rate tends to be quite high. But along the way, they reach this lake, and they use it as a portal to enter another realm. At the time, I was reading Memory, Thorn and Sorrow. Memory, Sorrow and Thorn? It's by Tad Williams. It's a collection of trilogy of books, Dragonbone Chair. It's brilliant. If you want an example of how to do low magic fantasy. But there was a character in it, and I can't remember. I think it was Circamerus or Canaris. I could be wrong about that. It's a long time since I read it. But essentially, I was reading that, and I was reading Game of Thrones. And oh, I was young, and I was dumb. And Slaine had an immense charisma role. So he got special training with this knight who specialised in axes. He doesn't in the book, but he did in the game. And what's more, this knight gifts this new student who shows remarkable promise an essentially unbreakable axe. Yeah, it was Valyrian steel. To this day, I cringe when I think about this. I can't believe I did it. I really cannot believe that I did that. It was so dumb. But it made for a very interesting character. Okay, so they leave that area and they go back through the portal. And from in the portal they talk to he's not a maester, but he's basically a maester from Game of Thrones. But he's not. He was this before that. He was an alchemist, I think. And he tells the party that you must go further east. You must travel to a distant city named Londinium, seat of the Roman Empire in Britannia. Fair enough. So they travel, and along the way they kill a lot of things. Don't get a huge amount of loot because I tend not to go for a lot of loot. And they eventually reach Londinium. Last session. So they discover that there is a cult, a sect at work in London, in Londinium, and it is basically trying to awaken a Pictish demon. And I'm not doing the story justice at all, but this isn't really about that story. It's more about the character Slaine. So we know it's the last session for Christmas. It turns out to be the last session for ever. And they go down underneath London. They enter this chasm where this cult are raising this demon and the Horned God. It wasn't really a god, but like I said, this setting was very much in flux. And they start killing shit. They start killing a whole lot of shit. And characters die. And the survivors are, you know, they don't stop. They do not stop the big bad arising. The high priest isn't killed in time. He is killed. He's split in two from here right down by a Valyrian steel axe. But he's not killed in time. The Horned One, the Horned God, which by the way is not to be mistaken for the pagan, real world pagan Horned One. This is basically me using a fairly generic term for a fairly generic demonic power. The raw power arises and it starts to chase them, seeing them as the only threat to its existence. It kills its cult members, its sect. It doesn't need them anymore. It's actually in the real world again. It's no longer trapped in some hell dimension. So the characters run. All except for Slaine, who basically turns around and says, who's coy, out of character, turns around and says, I have to die in battle. But I also have to die of this terminal illness. Right. I'm going to fight this guy. So they're on this staircase coming back up from the bowels beneath Londinium, back into Londinium itself. There are people dying left, right and centre. Their PCs have died. NPCs are just being slaughtered left, right and centre. Everything is shaking. Houses are falling down. Palaces are collapsing. Libraries are going up in flames when torches are knocked over. You name it, it's going bad. It's going really bad. Londinium is falling. Londinium is burning. And there's no one living by the river. The PCs are running up the staircase as fast as they can, and Slaine turns around. He hefts the axe. He gives this huge battle cry. Ah! And charges. And that was the end of the PC character, Slaine. But that wasn't the end of Slaine. Oh no! That was not the end of Slaine. Slaine would go on to become my favourite recurring NPC in Immortal Empires in that setting. I have used him in every game set in that I have played. All of them. Purely because he's such a great NPC. He is a batshit fucked up OP PC, But as an NPC who kind of drifts in and drifts back out again, he's glorious. So the last time he appeared in a game was in another game called the Celtic Campaign, unsurprisingly. And in this one, he was more or less about a way of introducing to the players to the world. So there's this group of players, and they've been told to make their way to an encampment which has an army gathering. The Romans are threatening Era. They're threatening to invade. They must be dealt with. Oh yes. So they're traveling through this woodland. It's dark. It's closed in. It's cramped. And there's this beast just flashes past them, whips one of them across the arm, injures them. Health points are lost. Blood is shed. They're pissed. They're this game world's equivalent of level 1 characters. So they go back to back. The weapons are out. Everyone's kind of like, this is one of Amanda's games. We could all die right here. It would be like her to kill all the PCs right here as a prologue. Let's just say they used to call me the Iron Bitch and leave it at that. So they're standing and they hear something walking towards them. It's not running anymore. It's so confident in its power. It just walks towards them, and they see what amounts to a werewolf. It's not actually a werewolf, but for all intents and purposes, it's huge. It's 8 foot tall. It's like 5 foot wide. It's got arms that almost reach the ground. It has claws as long as my fingers. It has fingers as long as my hand. It's huge. It's terrifying. It's unbelievably deadly, and it charges them. So I go, roll for initiative. Now in the system I run, the Bastardized system I run, everyone rolls 2d10 for a percentage. So it's 1 to 100. The person with the lowest number gets initiative, gets to go first, and then you go in order, and I roll for the creatures and the enemies. Fine. Everyone's happy with this. Creature gets initiative, and everyone goes beep. So it's charging them. Yeah, claws back. They're all wondering which one of their characters is going to die first. And this double-bladed axe flashes out of the woodland alongside them and splits this beast in two. Parts fall left, parts fall right. A lot of blood sprays the party, and out of the woodland strides this huge, totally scar-covered Celt, covered in body paint, stripped to the waist. You know, just imagine the biggest axe-wielding barbarian you can, and you're getting close to this guy, and he walks up, he picks up his axe, and flicks it, and the blood just sprays everywhere. And he turns around and he goes, I'd like to introduce myself. I am Slaine, champion of the court of the King of Munster. He's waiting for you. Slaine did not appear again for the rest of that game. I think he went with the party for the first full session, but that was his introduction, and that's how I tend to use him. Slaine is a great example of a PC gone bad who becomes an NPC made good. He's your champion of good. He's the champion that, you know, the player characters might be sent to support. He's the one that introduces the player characters to their adventure or sets their feet on the correct path. And I wouldn't have this character in my world, in the world that I'm still working on, except for Koi, the creator of Insanity, because with Slaine, he created a lot of insanity. Has he appeared other times? Yes. Not always announcing his presence, but he has been in every single game. My little sister Claire, when she went to Canada, we ran a one-off game to say goodbye, where the players were 3 girls. All 3 were playing. It was my little sister Nate, my little sister Claire, and Pixie, and they were playing basically temple prostitutes, and there was a murderer, and it was in Londinium long after this god had arisen. Nobody realized that it was still there. It was underground. Slaine had succeeded. He hadn't killed it, but he had found a way to trap it. He had hoped eternally. Turns out, not so much. But that's a tale for another day. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. Koi, thank you so much for Slaine. He's the character that just keeps on giving to me. He really is. And he is my favourite NPC by a long shot. So I hope you all enjoyed this. I'll be back again next Saturday, when once more we will delve into the depths of tabletop role-playing, board gaming, and all that fun shit. So in the meantime, be good, have a great day, and bye for now.